Good evening, guys. It is Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025. Welcome to this edition of Being Real with Rebi Amaris. Um, First off, I'd like to say if you are not subscribed to our channel, please hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you. Please like our little video that we're about to do here. Share our content. Please make comments. I love to talk to you all. Like to get discussions started because discussions are needed for change to happen. Change does not happen when mouths stay closed. Um, yep, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. It's free and it's the easiest, quickest way to help support our little community here. Share our content, comment. All right, guys, this is something that I've been working on for a while, and I keep like sitting back and watching and watching and watching. And I've come to the realization that if I continue to do that, excuse me, that this little addition is never going to happen because what I'm about to talk about is something that continues to happen. Now, I guess to ease us into what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you a few names. David Medina, Emmanuel Laro. I'm sorry, Haro. Gosh, I'm sorry. I know somebody by the last name of Laro, and that just totally messed that up. That should be Emmanuel Haro or Harrow, depending on where you're from and how you speak it. And lastly, the newborn baby girl of one Lakin Snelling. Now that is Lakin, not Lakin, not Lockin. Her name is Lakin. It's a southern name. She's from Eastern Tennessee. 21 years old. University of Kentucky student. Cheerleader. So y'all can, the one that you may not know, the one that you may know the least about is David Medina. David Medina last week had his life taken by his mother, one Wilma Medina. His father happened to be a China Grove Police Department officer. This happened in Universal City, Texas. David was 9 years old when his life was taken by his mother. She had had no previous mental health issues. However, as they were dragging her down the hallway at the police station, of course, she started talking about people following her, but very quickly, as soon as she was Mirandized, asked for an attorney. So I don't think she was all that crazy, guys. She has pled not guilty to this. But, unfortunately, the father had come home from work, literally, had come home from his, shift from the China Grove Police Department and heard screaming coming from their master bedroom, proceeded to go back there, found the door locked and barricaded. He had to break down his own bedroom door to see his wife holding their 9-year-old son, bloodied, and she was then stabbing herself in a futile attempt to take her own life. She was taken to the medical center and treated for her injuries, and as I said before, was then quickly taken to the police department and charged, booked, and has been incarcerated on a $600,000 bond, which I hope and pray that she does not make. But yeah, she tried to pull the crazy thing. Oh, people have been following, but literally as soon as she was Mirandized, asked for an attorney. That's not a crazy person. That's a sane person. The fact that she barricaded her bedroom door because why did she do that? Because she didn't want to be stopped, because she knew what she was doing was wrong. Okay? A crazy person would have just done that right in front of her husband and not even tried to keep him from seeing it. See it's nuts. Then we have Miss Lakin, who is cheerleading and out doing jumps and being thrown up in the air and all these things while she's pregnant. Apparently delivers the child, and the child is found wrapped in a blanket in her closet in her dorm room at the University of Kentucky. Now, from what I understand, they still haven't come back with a cause of death for Lakin's baby. However, she still is, facing abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, all that good stuff. And of course, we all know about little Emmanuel Haro. We still haven't found him yet. I'm going to read off to you some other names. Some of them you may recognize, some of them you may not. Now, we're going to start off with some that, and you're going to see the difference. I'm going to start with Byron Corman, Gannon Stouch, Maddie McCann, Sebastian Rogers, Summer Wells, Michael Monkey Vaughn. These are all children that are missing. Some of them, they believe they know what happened to them, but still. And I have to throw into that one Harmony Montgomery. We know what happened to Harmony, but we still haven't found Harmony. Just like with Byron Corman, that's from the Portland, Oregon area. It's believed allegedly that his stepmother had something to do with his disappearance. Just as with Gannon Stouch, Letitia Stouch has actually, she is in jail. Um, Maddie McCann, some people believe that it was a local predator, although there's just as many other people believe that her parents had something to do with it. Not that they did it purposely, but still, even if you unintentionally, just like with Jaden Spicer, even if you unintentionally caused the death of your child, I mean, come on, call an ambulance. I don't care if you're both doctors, call an ambulance. Um, you know, Michael Monkey Vaughn, we don't know. There's no hint towards any parental involvement there. As a matter of fact, his mother is fighting every day for her life, on top of trying to find her son. Summer Wells, there's big belief that in one way or another, her parents had something to do with that. Sebastian Rogers, of course, we all know there's now this is all alleged, okay, that, his mother and stepfather possibly had something to do with his disappearance. Um, and then of course, like we said, Manuel Haro, we already know that his parents had something to do with his disappearance. Little Evelyn Boswell, she went missing for a while. Thankfully, we found her. Her mother's in prison for her death. Little Quentin Simon, he went missing for a little while. Thankfully, we found the best that they could of him. And his mother, Leilani, is in jail for his death as well. And you can't talk about things like this if you don't throw in, the sad story of JonBenet Ramsey. She was missing for a few hours, but just the fact that, there still has never been an actual finding of who was responsible for her death. Some believe that it was family. Some believe that it was an intruder. Either way, this little girl at 6 years old, on Christmas night, her life was taken. Now, here's some others that, you know, we know exactly what happened to them. Hudson and Asher Koch. Their lives were taken in Nebraska by their father, Jeremy. Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker. Their lives were taken by their father, Travis Decker, in Washington State. Gavin, Sienna, Ammon, Briley, and Macy Haight. Their lives were taken by their father, Michael, in Utah. Zachary, Sadie Ann, Madison Longo. Their lives were taken by their father, Christian, in Oregon. Clayton, Hunter, and Chase Doerman. Their lives were taken by their father, Chad Doerman, in Ohio. And a case that is very close to my heart, a case that I have been doing beyond rabbit hole research on for 3 years now. Not because I need to find out who took the lives of these children and their mother, or because I want to, we have to educate the community. Because in this case, there were things that, had they been picked up on sooner, or had people not been scared to say something, you know, there's always the possibility that you can intervene in something, you know. Every one of these cases, there were things that were happening that, had someone, instead of going home and saying, that's kind of weird, don't you think? Isn't that weird? Don't you think this is weird? Don't you think that was weird? If someone had, but no, people don't want to speak. It's like I said, change doesn't happen if we keep our mouths closed. And this case is, like I said, I've been working on this case for 3 years for the purpose of advocating for these little girls and educating the community so that we are better equipped to pick out things that we possibly, if we open our mouths and aren't scared to speak up, can, prevent things from happening. And that is Bella Marie Watts and Celeste Cece Rampage Watts, along with their mother, Shanann Rusick Watts. Their lives were taken by father/husband Chris Watts in Colorado. Like I said, guys, I have done a lot of, for one particular thing that I have put together here recently is, family annihilation. It seems to be a growing trend. I mean, just like I said, Chad Doerman, Chris Watts, Travis Decker, um, what was his name? Christian Longo, Jeremy Koch. I mean, this is family annihilation. You're taking out all of your family. Okay. And so I did a little digging on this specific thing, and kind of just based it on 2022 to 2025. Okay. And basically from that time period, it's just a continuation of cases across the United States, and it is one of the most extreme forms of domestic violence. Family annihilation is one of the most extreme forms of domestic violence. Based on comprehensive data analysis from multiple sources, including the Violence Policy Center, Gun Violence Archive, and just basic law enforcement agencies. Um, These incidents, family annihilations, occur approximately every 5 days in the United States. This is something that, there is urgent demand for attention from policymakers, mental health professionals. And like I said, I mean, this, I keep harping on our mental health thing here in the United States is crap, in communities. Um, 94% of family annihilators are men. 86% of that 94% use firearms, and 84% of victims are women. So that kind of gives you the intersection of where the domestic violence comes in. Um, the domestic violence, gun access, and something that I had never heard of it referred quite like this, but toxic masculinity is a huge characterization in these events. Um, you know, Also, murder suicide incidents have maintained an alarmingly consistent rate over the United States. And that's according to the Violence Policy Center's American Roulette series. Approximately 10 murder suicide events occur each week in the United States, with family annihilation cases representing a significant subset of these incidents. The Gun Violence Archive documented 443 murder suicide incidents nationwide in 2024 alone. Okay. And the preliminary data for 2025 completely suggests that trend continues unabated. Um, there is a significance in clusterings geographically for the distribution of these cases. Texas leading the nation with 12% of all family annihilation victims. Um, they seem to think that correlates strongly with the state's high rate of firearms access and domestic violence homicides, with over 200 domestic violence homicides occurring annually in the state. Um, Basically, so another there's an indication that, of course, states with the more permissive gun laws and states that promote the more traditional gender role expectations, um, those states experience higher rates of family annihilation. Firearms are the predominant weapon used in family annihilation cases, involved in approximately 86 to 90% of incidents. However, as we know, that can change. That percentage represents a critical, intersection, like I was speaking, with the domestic violence and gun violence. Um, as the presence of firearms in the domestic violence situations increases the risk of homicide by 500%. The lethality rate is significantly higher when perpetrators have access to firearms, and particularly when combined with threats of self harm or suicide. Again, your mental health matters. Your mental health matters, okay? Family annihilators during this period have exhibited remarkably consistent demographic patterns. Male perpetrators account for 91 to 94% of all cases, with most being middle aged, typically between 35 and 50 years old. Typical profile includes non Hispanic white males who often present as ordinary community members with no red flags to anyone. Mental health issues represent are present in about 24 to 25% of these documented cases. However, that's probably undercounted due to limited mental health screening and the stigma surrounding mental illness. Um, the 2024 Duluth case of Anthony Nephew exemplified that the intersection of the mental health crisis and political extremism. Nephew, he had been hospitalized for mental health issues and had explicitly told police that he would take out his family if Donald Trump won the 2024 election. Okay? You are mentally sick if you are willing to take out your family over politics. Okay? Just saying. And despite the documented threat and the mental health history, he was able to obtain a gun permit in September of 2024, mere months before, he took the lives of his family. Research from Johns Hopkins University indicates that prior domestic violence is the number one risk factor in murder-suicide cases, and it's present in approximately 70% of incidents. However, only 25% of this prior violence appears in arrest records. Why? Because victims are scared to tell. So the true scope of domestic violence preceding these these types of tragedies is significantly underreported. Hidden domestic violence often manifests as psychological abuse, financial control, and just general threats that escalate over time, which we've talked about in a previous video. The different types of domestic abuse. Perpetrators frequently exhibit characteristics of extreme narcissism and control. They view their family members as possessions, not people, not individuals. And that, it creates a psychological framework where the perpetrator can't conceive of family members existing independently. Okay. In other words, these people can't see their oldest son graduating from college and moving out, getting a job, getting married, having a family, and actually existing on their own. Okay? And it's the thing, that son is going to fail in their mind. There's no way that son can do all that. Why? Because they're me. They only exist because of me. They only got to go to college because of me. If I am not there, they are not going to, continue doing the things in life that normal people do. Okay. So it's leading, and it leads to that conclusion that if, this person who is mentally ill, if they get to the point of, I'm going to take my life, well, if you in life do not think that your family can do anything and can continue and can do anything in life without you, that's when they make that decision of, well, if I'm going to take my life, I'm going to take theirs too, because they can't survive without me. It's that whole narcissistic thing. Let's talk about a few cases. The Broken Arrow octuple murder suicide. Now, this happened in October of 2022. The Nelson family, happened in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And it's one of the most devastating family annihilation cases of the period of 2022 to 2025. Brian Nelson, 34, shot and killed his wife Brittany, age 32, and their 6 children, aged 1 to 13, before setting their house on fire and taking his own life. The medical examiner's report revealed that all 6 children were shot before the house was set ablaze, with the eldest child, Brian Nelson II, suffering at least 6 gunshot wounds. Financial stress served as a significant precipitating factor as the family had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in December 2020, owing over $127,000 in student debt, with both parents being unemployed. Despite their financial difficulties, though, the couple owned 9 guns valued at over $18,000 each. So that kind of highlights that deadly combination of economic pressure and firearm access. Okay. And that characterizes a lot of the family annihilation. These people couldn't pay their bills, but they own 9 guns valued over $18,000 each, people, each. Okay. Had just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Okay. Where else have we seen financial issues pop up in family annihilation cases? Well, you have to throw in the Watts, because they were working on their, I believe, they weren't working on it, but they had already filed bankruptcy twice and were in the process of having their house foreclosed on. But they had a whole basement full of Thrive products. Same thing here. Now, please understand, do not come for me in the comments. No, no one deserves to die. And it is never the victim's fault that someone decided to take their life. Okay, I'm here to, as I said before, let's educate the community to see things that maybe if we say something about it, maybe we can stop bad things from happening. Okay, and I'm merely pointing out similarities in cases. Okay, so don't come for me in the comments. All right, now let's look at the Haight family killings. This was in January of 2023, and this was in Enoch, Utah. And it demonstrated the escalation of domestic violence, despite previous interventions. Michael Haight, 42, shot and killed his wife Tasha, her mother Gail Earl, and 5 children before taking his own life. This occurred 2 weeks after Tasha had filed for divorce and had been preceded by documented domestic violence incidents dating back to 2020. In other words, this had been documented since 2020. Domestic violence had been documented. Man, a particularly disturbing police investigation was where the Haight's eldest daughter, then 14, reported that her father had become assaulted and that she was afraid he would kill her. I mean, their daughter had stated that prior to all this. And despite all of that, no charges were filed. No matter how many times this woman tried to save herself and save her family, no charges were ever filed against her husband. Now, she did, Tasha Haight, she expressed hope that the incidents, would serve as a wake-up call for her husband, okay, in one particular call. And she verbally stated that she hoped that this would serve as a wake-up call for her husband. Now, the investigative officer, because she made that comment, concluded that there was no indication that there would be any violent behavior on Michael's part. And due to that, investigating officer concluding that, because Tasha made the statement that she hoped that this would serve as a wake up call, it was after that Michael took the 7 lives of his family. Okay. Because of the officer thinking, oh, well, you know, you think it's a wake up call. Okay, well, surely he's not going to do anything then. Not how many reports do we already have against this man who continues to do this. Yeah, I'm just that really upsets me because but as I said before, education to the community includes police officers. Let's get these police officers better trained where it comes to domestic violence issues. Now, the Manoa knife attack in March of 2024. This is the case of Paris Oda in Honolulu. And as I said, a knife. Okay. Where else have we seen a knife here lately? Well, the David Medina case. Yep. Okay, so let's get to this. Oda 46 used a kitchen knife to take the life of his wife and their 3 children before turning the knife on himself and taking his own life. Again, financial pressure, tax evasion fears. He had revealed to family members that he hadn't paid taxes in years and had actually stated that he would rather die than go to prison. And it also demonstrated the planning aspect of family annihilation, as he continually was texting his wife about needing a plan to do it, and that was in quotes, do it, and take the children with them because he believed that no one could care for his children better than himself. Um, the reason that he did not use a firearm was because it wasn't because he didn't try. He did attempt to purchase a firearm in March of 2024, but was unsuccessful. So, you know, he was planning on using a firearm, but for some reason or another, that purchase, could not be completed. Therefore, he used a kitchen knife out of their kitchen. The West Valley City tragedy. This was in December of 2024. And now I know that I'm probably going to butcher these names. I'm going to do the best I can. Di Ray, 42, shot and killed his wife, Boo May, and 3 of their 4 children in their Utah home. The sole survivor was 17-year-old Sha Ray, who suffered a severe brain injury from a gunshot wound to the head. Now, this case kind of highlighted the vulnerability of refugee families. This family was a member of Myanmar's Karenni ethnic minority who had fled ethnic cleansing and built a new life in America. The bright light of this situation was that the sole survivor, who suffered a severe brain injury due to the gunshot wound to the head, actually graduated high school with near perfect grades despite his injuries. Okay. And it serves, he serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of these tragedies, but also the strength of those who survived them. Okay. Let's talk about geographic, patterns. The geographic distribution of family annihilation between the years of 2022 and 2025 kind of reveals a significant clustering in the South, and Midwest regions, of course, characterized by the higher rates of gun ownership, the more traditional gender roles, and in some cases, weaker gun control laws. Texas leads with the highest absolute number of cases, followed by Florida, Georgia, California, and Missouri. It correlates strongly with what researchers term gun culture regions, where firearms are more readily available and culturally normalized. States with permitless carry laws and minimal background check requirements show disproportionately higher rates of family annihilation, supporting the connection that, gun access and intimate partner homicide, you know, murder, suicide. Um, Family annihilation cases often cluster around specific triggering events, such as separation or divorce proceedings. Those actually represent the highest risk period. The Violence Policy Center research indicates that the point of separation is the most dangerous time for domestic violence victims. Okay, this is something that we've, figured out and known for a while. Again, we've got to get, you know, the communities, the police departments, sheriff departments, all any authorities. I mean, all of them. We need to get them better trained on this. Ask the questions. Have you filed for any type of legal separation or divorce from your partner recently? And if they tell you yes, then please, as an officer of the law, do what you can to get them safe, to get them to safety, to get them away, because it is the most dangerous time. I mean, that's the perpetrator's sense where their control is threatened the most. Economic crisis is a significant trigger. Unemployment is a significant risk factor, especially when you combine it with a history of domestic violence. If there's already domestic violence going on in the home, and then you have economic problems, loss of employment, things of that nature, it increases, significantly. Like in COVID-19, there was increased rates of domestic violence overall, with the family annihilation cases following similar patterns due to increased isolation, financial stressors, and it reduced access to support services. Okay. I mean, does everybody remember when, well, I don't know if it happened everywhere, but I know where I live, there was a statement made. The only reason that we will send a police officer or an ambulance to your home is if it is a life or death situation. Someone is about to die. Okay. In other words, do not call us for domestic situations. I mean, and they stated that. We will not send a police officer to your home for domestic situations. That's what, we're talking about with the reduced access to support services. I mean, you can't go in to talk to anybody because, well, I mean, you have offices being completely closed for one during that time period. And then we moved on to well, you can only have so many people in a certain area at a certain time, and the mask and the whole, I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. Um, Seasonal patterns also have higher rates, like during holidays or even the summer months. And that's, potentially related to increased family time. You're at home with your family all summer. Everybody's in the house all the time. Holidays, everybody's in the house all the time, but increased family time and stress. And, with the holidays, oftentimes, again, comes that economic stress, the financial stressors. Um, you know, and then you have weapons, methods, and lethality factors. The with the firearm dominance, overwhelmingly, the use of firearms in family annihilation cases, um, is a critical public health concern. As I said, approximately 86 to 90% of family annihilation cases involve firearms, significantly higher than the general homicide rate. The preference, for firearms relates to both their lethality and the perpetrator's desire for rapid, efficient, uh, you know, it's rapid and it's efficient. Okay, it's quick and efficient. Before there being a potential, intervention. It's, like we all see when you see the standoffs with authorities, and it's a domestic situation and this person has a firearm. That person knows that no matter what, they still can take the life of the person that's right there in their arms before those authorities will be able to take their life, in a lot of situations. So it's that efficient use before that potential, intervention can happen. Um, Handguns predominate that, primarily due to the accessibility and ease of use in close quarters. Shotguns are only used in 1% of overall gun deaths. Um, However, with domestic violence use, they are predominantly featured in several cases. Um, one particular case is Long Island case where Joseph DeLuca used a 12-gauge shotgun to kill 4 family members. Alternative weapons kind of, reflect that premeditation and planning. Like the Manoa case used knives. Um, and, some perpetrators actually attempt to disguise their crimes through fire, like in the Broken Arrow case, where he set the house, ablaze after he shot his whole family. And it often, the choice of the weapon often relates to availability and that perpetrator's background. For instance, those with like military or law enforcement experience are usually more likely to use firearms effectively, while others may resort to readily available household items. So just never know. Now let's talk about some risk indicators. Research has identified several critical risk factors that significantly increase the likelihood of family annihilation. Prior domestic violence remains the strongest predictor. It's present in approximately 70% of cases, despite being formally documented as only 25% of incidents. And of course, that suggests that much domestic violence remains hidden from official from systems. Um, we have to open up the line of communication. It doesn't get reported. Okay, access to firearms multiplies the risk exponentially, particularly when combined with threats of suicide or homicide. The presence of guns in homes with domestic violence increases homicide risk by 500%, making that firearm access a critical intervention point. In other words, if you know a family that domestic violence is a thing in their household, do what you can to get the firearms out of that home. Okay? Now, mental health crises, particularly depression and suicidal ideation, um, significant risk factor. Okay? The combination of depression, narcissistic personality traits, and external stressors creates a dangerous psychological profile that requires immediate intervention. Again, please don't be afraid to speak up. If you're on the outside looking in, but you can see things, don't be afraid to talk. Might it cost you that friendship for a little while? Maybe. But I can guarantee you that in the long run, that person's going to come back to you and said, you know what? I know you did what you did because you cared, and you saved the lives of me and of myself and my children. And I thank you for that. And I'm so sorry that I treated you the way that I did. Okay, and that's just the way that's going to go. Financial stress and job loss are very common precipitating factors, especially when you combine those with other risk indicators. Often shame and loss of identity are associated with financial failure, and they can trigger violence in individuals who tie their self worth to their role as provider. When you have a household where, again, it goes kind of back to that traditional gender roles thing where mom stays home with the kids and dad goes out and works, and he's provided thus far this wonderful life, and then for some reason or another dad loses his job. And when you combine that with other things, depression, if they do have any of those little nasty narcissistic, traits and things like that, it literally can lead to a family annihilation. Environmental and social factors, social isolation, and lack of community support completely and 100% increased risk. Perpetrators become increasingly disconnected from social networks that can provide alternative perspectives or interventions. Um, and the isolation, that type of isolation intensifies during periods of separation when traditional, support systems, you know, can't be accessed. Now, substance abuse, particularly alcohol dependence, appears in many cases. However, comprehensive data, to that is limited. Substance abuse can trigger violence. It can also reduce inhibitions that might otherwise prevent extreme actions. In other words, that brake pedal that we all have in our brain. Substance abuse will make your foot go to sleep. And even though when you're not under substances, um, you know your when to make your foot hit that brake. But when your body's under, the substances, your brain might be saying, "Hey, hit that brake. Hey, foot, hit that brake. Hit that brake, foot." But your foot's asleep because those substances that you took made your foot go to sleep. Now that's just, of course, please understand, you know, just a analytical type little thing. But yeah, I mean, it can they trigger violence and they reduce your inhibitions. Um, and this one, I cannot relate to this one because I have a bonus child and I love him just as if I spat him out of my body myself. So I can't. This one is horrible to me. But the presence of stepchildren in the home increases the risk. Perpetrators, they feel a less emotional connection to the non-biological children, and sometimes can view them as obstacles in a relationship, especially if there's problems in that relationship and they're trying to reconcile. Um, they can see that as an obstacle to that, reconciliation. Um, Crisis intervention and mental health services, they're effective prevention requires like a multifaceted approach. And you have to address various risk factors with family annihilation. Crisis intervention in services accessible through the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline provide critical support during mental health emergencies. Um, but that's only if you can get to the phone, right? But if you can, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, they do offer critical support during that time. Um, and honestly, they really need to, they're limited on what they can do at this point. Those services really need to be enhanced to specifically address the very complex dynamics of domestic violence and homicidal ideation. I mean, mental health screening and treatment is got to be integrated with domestic violence intervention programs to identify individuals at the highest risk. For instance, in the case of Anthony Nephew in Duluth, um, critical, and there was that he already had been hospitalized for mental health issues, um, documented health crises, mental health crises, but it wasn't adequately addressed. And therefore, I mean, you had this political thing going on in his head. And I mean, clearly, this was a person who should not have been let out to live life with his own devices, so to speak. Um, I mean, let that family was let down. Um, Firearm access restrictions, extreme risk protection orders. Those are a crucial intervention tool. Um, and those allow temporary removal of firearms from individuals deemed dangerous by family members or law enforcement. Okay, that is something that a lot of people have never even heard of. Um, Mainly because a lot of people look at it as it steps on my right to keep and bear arms. But if you've had over the past 3 months the local police department called out to your home because you've harmed your wife or your children in the past 2 months, let's see, 8 times, you know, you're dangerous. You're a dangerous person. And therefore, it's a temporary removal. It's not a permanent removal. It's a temporary removal. Um, but you know, it significantly varies across the states. Um, Background check expansions and waiting periods, can provide additional safeguards, particularly for individuals experiencing acute mental health crises. That's a big deal. If you have someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis and they walk into a pawn shop to purchase said weapon, with the intentions of going home tonight and taking care of all of his problems, family included, um, those waiting periods save lives. So we need to, extend those. Um, those background expansions literally are safeguards that, especially when you are dealing with acute mental health crises, can help. Back again to Anthony Nephew. Um, he was able to obtain a gun permit just 2 months after being hospitalized for mental health issues, um, where he was saying, he told them, if Donald Trump wins the election, I'm going to take out my whole family. Clearly this man needed help, and he was not only let out of the hospital, but it shows these critical gaps in our systems. um, Domestic violence response enhancement, improving domestic violence screenings and intervention programs, that's paramount. Prior domestic violence is the strongest risk factor for family annihilation. So we need to include training healthcare providers Educators, what do I keep saying? We need to educate the teachers. We need to educate the educators for things to that they don't know that they could be looking for that could prevent these things from happening. Um, okay, but and community members, just a general community, to recognize, all the warning signs and to make appropriate referrals. Okay, we have to be able to do this. We have to get everybody educated, and you can't be scared to speak. Protective orders, um, those have to be strengthened, with better enforcement mechanisms. I mean, because basically, what's a protective order? It's a piece of paper. It's only as important as the person who is holding it in their hand. If that person does not see any importance in that piece of paper, it means nothing. Just because a judge gave it to them doesn't mean anything. Better enforcement mechanisms and coordination across jurisdictions, better fluid communication between jurisdictions. Many family, annihilation cases occur despite existing protective orders. Um, and, that completely kind of suggests that our current systems are completely inadequate for addressing the highest risk situations. Community education programs must address the cultural factors that contribute to family annihilation, including those crazy words: toxic masculinity, possessive relationship dynamics, um, and normalization of firearm violence. Um, they should target, high risk demographics and communities, but also promote, healthy relationship models and conflict resolution skills. That's another thing that needs to be taught. Conflict resolution. It's not just a little scary word that needs to be used in your job application to Neiman Marcus. How are you with conflict resolution? Meaning, for that particular instance, how are you with arguing with those pesky little customers that want to argue about and nitpick every little thing? No, conflict resolution goes way higher than that. And we need to take it out of our HR department and put it into our family skills department. Economic support programs can help with addressing some of the financial stressors. Um, However, these also have to be combined with mental health and domestic violence interventions to address some underlying psychological factors. We can't just, you know now, don't get me wrong, there are some cases where, families need assistance, and there's no domestic violence going on at all. It's just that family has fallen on hard times financially, and they need help, assistance wise. It's a, temporary thing. It's meant to help people get back on their feet without the stress of the financial burden, right? Okay. But if you have a situation where domestic violence is already a problem, then there should also be those domestic violence interventions, and mental health interventions to try to detect any of those underlying psychological factors. The healthcare system must play a much larger role in family annihilation prevention, by enhanced screening protocols and coordinated response systems. Emergency departments should implement standardized domestic violence screening, particularly for patients presenting with mental health crises or substance abuse issues. Primary care providers need training to recognize the warning signs, and to make the appropriate referrals. Um, many perpetrators have contact with healthcare systems prior to committing, the family annihilations. And these can include, screening for firearm access during mental health assessments and depression treatment. Comprehensive, gun safety legislation targeting high-risk individuals represents a critical need. Universal, background checks, mandatory waiting periods, and strengthened extreme risk protection order laws with adequate funding for implementation and enforcement. Enhanced penalties for domestic violence violations, particularly those involving weapons or threats. Those can provide additional deterrent effects while incapacitating high risk individuals. Um, However, enforcement mechanisms must be strengthened, to ensure these penalties are consistently applied. We need data collection. Systematic data collection on family annihilation cases remains inadequate. That, like we've been talking about the whole time, most abuse goes unreported. Everything is underreported. And it hampers prevention efforts and policy development. Um, a comprehensive national database, should track all murder suicide incidents with standardized reporting requirements across jurisdictions. That would help it would help all jurisdictions be able to see the commonalities in all of the cases so they can better educate their officers when dealing with these situations. Research funding for domestic violence and suicide prevention, it should prioritize family annihilation studies. I mean, these have a devastating impact on families and communities. Because when you have a family annihilation, it's not just the family. I mean, the whole community is devastated. Um, Technology and social media influences, social media and online communities have a huge influence on family annihilation perpetrators. Okay? Now, not in the way that I'm doing it, though. Some cases, have shown evidence of radicalization or exposure to extremist ideologies on social media. For instance, again, the Anthony Nephew case, that demonstrated, how the political extremism combined with mental illness created that particularly dangerous situation. Digital monitoring and intervention programs that can, those can provide new opportunities for early identification and prevention. The only thing that you kind of have to get around there are privacy concerns, and resource limitations. Those are challenges. That's, something that needs to be worked on. Um, Economic and, social disruptions. You have, if historical patterns continue, okay, future economic disruptions will increase the family annihilation rates. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a preview, of how these social isolation and economic stress can exacerbate, domestic violence and mental health crises. Um, Think about this: the fires out on Maui, large scale disruptions. They can create those stressors that can trigger annihilations in vulnerable individuals. Um, so basically, to kind of wrap it up, during the period of 2022 2025, it's clear that family annihilation, is a persistent and devastating form of violence, and it demands urgent, coordinated intervention. Like I said, with incidents occurring every 5 days in the United States, this claims hundreds of lives annually, and it represents a critical public health emergency that intersects the domestic violence, gun violence, and mental health crises. Okay, So we're not looking at one thing. We're looking at several, but we have to address all of them. Therefore, when, like I said, educating the public, educating educators, educating um, doctors, educating the authorities, police officers, all those. You're not just looking for one thing. You're looking. There's several things that you're looking at, and we have to increase all of the things that we're doing to eliminate the violence, gun violence, domestic violence, our mental health. That's the biggest one that we have to work on, because as I've said before, clearly mental health in the United States is our largest problem, but by far it is also the hardest to get treatment for, due to the stigma, um, insurance problems, availability to providers. It's awful. The consistent, patterns that observed during this period, being male perpetrators using firearms to take the lives of female partners and children. That highlights the need for targeted interventions, and addressing such things as toxic masculinity, the firearm access, domestic violence. You take the cases examined in the Broken Arrow, octuple murder, suicide. That was in West Valley City. Um, Current prevention systems are inadequate to protect the most vulnerable families. Like right now, like that, what we have going on right now in our prevention systems, totally not ready for that situation. An octuple life taking. Effective prevention, it requires, as I've said, the multifaceted approach, enhanced mental health services, improved domestic violence intervention, strengthened firearms measures, um, and community based education programs. Okay? Again, and the success of those intervention programs depends on adequate funding and coordination across systems and sustained political commitment to addressing these root causes. If we don't have those in the legislative, branch behind us implementing laws, implementing systems, um, there's only so much the people down here on the low end of the totem pole can do. But most critically, we must recognize that these cases are not random. They are predictable. Okay. Identifiable risk factors, that all can be addressed in all of these. The children and families lost during, this particular time period, they represent a tragic toll and a call to action that we can't ignore anymore. Their memory demands that we do better in protecting future families from this ultimate form of domestic violence. Think of the survivors like Shire, who overcame the severe brain injuries to graduate high school. Those remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of community support in healing from these tragedies. You know, um, the survivor's strength should inspire continued efforts to prevent future families from experiencing such devastating losses. Um, we just hope to, through comprehensive and sustained intervention, we can hope to reduce the frequency of these tragic events and protect vulnerable families. But as I've stated, go back and watch this video again. it's not just one thing that's going. Harsher gun background check waiting periods are not going to do it alone. Um, you have to have the education of the community, education of physicians, education of educators. Um, you have to, all of these agencies have to work together. We have to have legislators putting into effect laws, um, harsher laws for domestic violences. For instance, you know, like here, the first time that you're called, like if it's your first time to have a domestic called on you, all that happens to you is you go sit in the jail for 12 hours for a cool off period. You don't have any charges, right? That's not cool. That's the beginning of a pattern. Look for these patterns. Even and you know, if you have these patterns of domestic violence already, and then other factors come into play, financial stressors, you know, specifically, um, you know, like I said, if you don't be scared to say something, don't be scared to go to bat for someone that you love because it could save their life. They might be mad at you right now, but in the long run, they're going to thank you for saving their life and the lives of their kids if they have any. But at the core, though, mental health, mental health services. We've got to get our country in a better place from a mental health standpoint. All right, guys. Well, I hope that, like I said, you know, not only I wanted to use this post as not only to you know, kind of memorialize all of the children and wives and other family members who have been lost to family annihilations and some not family annihilations. But, you know, we're losing too many children is what I'm trying to say. Okay, my tongue is getting tied. What I'm trying to say is we're losing too many children here. And that's why I said if I kept waiting, I kept adding names to my list. And it's like, okay, you just got to stop and do the video. Why do you think I'm so hard on this resilient Jenkins case? Because I see all of these things, all these problems, substance abuse. Um, you have the financial problem going on. There, you know, like I said, what we've seen lately in some videos certainly suggest that there may be some domestic violence, child abuse going on. Um, so yeah, I'm very passionate about this. So, guys, please like this video. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you in our community. Share our content and, you know, comment. Start a conversation in the comments. You know, like I said, change doesn't occur when we keep our mouths closed. All right, guys. Um, my dog is sitting here licking his butt, and I'm sure you can hear it. So I'm going to get off of here. But please, like I said, you know, go back and listen to this again. And if you need to, play it for somebody else that needs to hear it. Because we all have to work together. Okay? We're losing too many kids. And it's just not, you know, we've got to stop it. All right, guys. Also, I wanted to remind you if you go to the description page for the Rebi Amaris YouTube channel, we have our Buy Me a Coffee link there. We have our CashApp link there. Um, we have done an Amazon wish list link there as well. And we have some merch um, with our cute little sugar skull uh, unicorn. So I love our little unicorn. I just think it's just the cutest thing ever. Anyway, guys, so if you want to go there to help us support the channel, you know, we're a small channel, so, but it doesn't matter. Even if I have to continue to make these videos with this Amazon tin tablet that I paid $50 for off of eBay, and this cheap Samsung budget phone, that's what I'll do. But if you do want to contribute, we can get some better quality videos, and that might get us in the algorithm a little bit quicker. But I feel that our mission is worth that. All right, guys. But like I said, I mean, liking the video and becoming a member, hey, that is totally like yes, please. That is enough for me. All right, guys. As I always say, y'all have fun out there. Please always, always, always know that you are loved. Be safe. I love you guys. Bye.